Hello everyone, it's your bud. Today we will be talking about the beginning of superhero, quirk, mutant, or evolved human culture, the start of a brand new world. I often think of the statement that was said in My Hero Academia, that if quirks hadn't appeared, then humans would be colonizing space by now. Now, before we get into the beginning of this, I want to quickly clarify that previous statement said colonize, not explore. Who knows how many quirks enabled humans to leave Earth to explore in My Hero. Even if collective humanity could not achieve colonization, I'm sure some individuals or small organizations could find a way to leave the atmosphere, even if it was only to get to the moon. Now, I've made up my own world here and thought up some cool organizations that I believe would exist and I think you'll like, and I also created a brand new classification system that I think covers all the evolved human abilities that could exist. Now, how the evolution comes about in this world is not as important as that it did occur. Whether an alien influence, a natural phenomenon, exposure to radiation sweeping the entire globe, or a scientific advancement like genetic engineering, or even natural through selective reproduction of the most unique of human traits, no matter the cause of the occurrence did happen, or as I will be referring to it from now on, the evolution event, Evolution Day or E-Day. And for the term describing these evolved beings, I'm not going to be using any previously established one like super or superhero or quirk holder or mutant. I'm creating my own here. I imagined a mistranslation that occurred when evolved human was translated into other languages, and as such the term evolved turned quickly to the term ELV, that is spelled ELV. So the elves are referring to any mutant, super, quirk holder, or hero with any form of power. So once again, that is ELV for elf, and I know that in the word evolved, the V comes before the L, but this is just a mistranslation, and I think elves with a V is just a really cool short form for evolved humans. So now let's talk about the classification system that I created. It is as follows. There are 5 different types of elves: form changers, elementals, enhancers, manipulators, and creators. Form changers are those who have the power to shapeshift their own body, no matter how minimal or significant. Elementals can control the elements and natural phenomenon, and though similar to the manipulators, they differ from them in a few key features. Enhancers can change the potency of attributes, whether internally within their own body or externally influencing the world around them or other people. This is stolen straight from Hunter x Hunter's Nen system. Manipulators are any who can manipulate the 4 fundamental forces that are known to exist, those being gravitational, electromagnetic, weak, and strong. So before we move on to the 5th and final of this classification system, I want to quickly paint a clear picture and recap what the 4 fundamental forces do so you can fully understand a manipulator's extent of powers. Now, the 4 fundamental forces as described by space.com are gravity. Gravity is the attraction between 2 objects that have mass or energy. Electromagnetism, which acts between charged particles. Opposite forces attract one another, while like forces repel. The greater the charge, the greater the force. And much like gravity, this force can be felt from an infinite distance. The weak force is responsible for particle decay. This is the literal change of one type of subatomic particle into another. And the 4th and final of these forces is the strong force. The strong force is 6,000 trillion times stronger than the force of gravity. That's 39 zeros after the 6. So a 6 followed by 39 zeros times stronger than the force of gravity, according to the hyperphysics website, and that's because it binds the fundamental particles of matter together to form even larger particles. And then 5th and finally in this classification system, there are the creators, who can fashion or produce things or entities into existence from a formless state, meaning things as simple as elements or as complex as personalities or powerful beings. So just to recap, there are 5 different classifications for these evolved beings, or elves. Once again, that's elves with a V. And though many share similar traits, the outcome of the use of them differs. Or if the outcome is similar, then the way it is brought about differs. For example, someone with the power to time travel would most likely be a manipulator, manipulating the 4 fundamental forces or even space-time. But a person that could time travel could also be an empowered, with a super ability of empowered time control within their own body. Also, a form changer could have a time-traveling form body, a time body, I guess. And perhaps even an enhancer could change the attributes or potency of time within a person, or over a wide area. And then finally, a creator could possibly produce or summon an object or being that wields the power of time travel. I love the idea of all 5 of these types of elves from the classification system, that being the form changers, elementals, enhancers, manipulators, and creators. So the idea of form shifters could be something as simple as Mystique, or something like the Human Torch or the Hulk. Elementals could be something like Storm from X-Men or Benders from Avatar. That would also be pretty awesome. Enhancers could be something like Doomsday from DC, or like All Might from My Hero, drawing on great reserves of strength, or could be like the enhancers of Hunter x Hunter, enhancing auras or enhancing something like paper to the strength of steel. Manipulators are perhaps the hardest to describe because they can be just too powerful, but anyone that can manipulate electromagnetism or gravity is someone I want on my team, and the ability to use the strong force or the weak force to essentially either black hole the individual with the strong force or disintegrate them with the weak force would be terrifying. Like Apocalypse turning people into sand, or like the many anime characters that can use the strong force to either create black holes or like Kamehameha. So they would be very similar, yet unlike enhancers, manipulators can create these fundamental forces to affect the physical state of an object. So they're not as much creating power as they're creating something to condense the power. So a manipulator could like Kamehameha by condensing, but an enhancer could Kamehameha just by enhancing their power. So it does differ. And this goes back to the whole statement that I said earlier, that some can share similar traits where the outcome of the use of them differs, or some of them can have the outcome be similar while the way is brought about differs. And then there's the creators who can fashion or summon things into existence, and no matter the source of their power, a creator is one that forms new objects in reality, the most powerful of them having total control over bringing their creations into reality in a complete state, like Green Lantern. The complex intelligence required to visualize the process when forming a complete and unfailing summoning is where their skill lies. So whether you can number 1, change your form, number 2, manipulate elementals or natural phenomenon, number 3, enhance the potency of attributes of objects or beings, number 4, manipulate the fundamental forces of nature or even delve into powers that can influence space-time, or finally number 5, to create and fashion things whether inanimate or animate into existence, you can imagine how the result of a human evolution event even on the smallest portion of humanity could decimate human civilization and culture. Now, I want to quickly mention something that I read in a My Hero forum before we get on with the rest of this. This is something from a forum. I'm just going to paraphrase it because there's a lot of like grammatical errors and it's like also got a few bad words, but I'm just going to like paraphrase it. So this is about the beginning of the My Hero universe. So the statement says this is at least 200 years after the fact, with modern record keeping as a base, and quite honestly, bleep has to be pretty bleeped for a hero system to exist as it does when you think about it. Crimes happen enough and in such a scale in Japan that an entire industry, academy, and even product line is dedicated to the specialized field agents patrolling the streets. A metro track breaking from a villain attack isn't even an event that would have people scared. It's a common enough occurrence that people will get close enough to wait and see the eventual hero arriving, like we saw in episode 1. Disruption of everyday life isn't even unexpected anymore, and the hero response is something that is wanted. It makes one wonder where the technology that gets displayed would go and further developed if humanity didn't have to use it to constantly keep the peace between itself, or if its purpose didn't begin and end with fighting domestic crime. So I really like that post that was on the forum. I really like that statement. It shows just how messed up and dark age things can get. And when I say dark age, I mean the fact that things stagnate instead of progressing. The only progression in My Hero is the progression to even more powerful villains and heroes fighting each other, like the equal and opposite forces of Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the only forward motion is the constant ramping up of powers upon powers. So now that we've done a good intro and you know that in this world I'm creating that there was an evolution event that produces the evolved or elves, and again that's ELVs as they became known, that are then classified into the 5 types being form changers, elementals, enhancers, manipulators, and creators. And now that you also know about the stagnation of society that could occur when progress is halted due to catastrophe, like right now when we all have to quarantine and social distance, the world has gone through so much change, and that's without evolution into super beings. So imagine if there was truly a world where the evolved appeared. How would civilization adapt? How would it endure? What would it form into? Well, I've thought it over, and here are my ideas. Let's get into the story. When the elves first appeared, they were not the only new evolution, for far out into space and throughout the universe itself evolved. Stars, nebulas, and great galaxies formed in tandem with the powers of the elves. These radiated with power, and through a quantum link, each of these were bound to a single human. Each of these humans was connected with a star, nebula, or galaxy that represents the breadth of their power, colored in infinite variety and in varying size due to the power and strength of the individuals that they are connected to. At first, this was not noticed for the widespread appearance of the elves and the initiatives of some to either catalog, register, or of others to utilize their powers for ill purposes caused a shift that disrupted civilization and distracted humanity from searching beyond the planet for answers. The power stars, as I will call them, were not noticed until much later, when the speed of light finally allowed for the closest power stars to be registered. Eventually, the World ELV Registry could learn to use these power stars to catalog the use of the powers of the elves, as they would each glow and shift whenever their linked elf activated their powers. And many elves joined the World ELV Registry organization using their powers of farsight or a myriad of other powers to search for yet undiscovered power stars, nebulas, or galaxy-sized masses of formless energy. And again, no matter the size of the galaxy, a nebula, or just a star, I'm going to refer to it as a power star. So many of the elves that joined the registry organization had powers like, I'm just going to use farsight because it really explains this really well. So like, for example, the star has to have light speed for it to be registered. So for example, if I used my power and I had a star out there linked to me, it would take so long for the light speed of that star to register. However, if someone had a farsight ability, that could get around light speed. There are probably many powers that can observe these stars in real time and get around light speed. While many sought to catalog and thus regulate and control by knowing what power star was linked to each individual elf, many more sought power to be gained through their new abilities, and many organizations pursuing both purposes began to form. Amongst them were the faithful saints, the title given to all religious supers. Amongst the faiths, many took this as a sign of religious providence and began to congregate to display the miracle of their new forms. Many refused the title of elf as it was shorthand for evolved being, as in real life many religions differ on their beliefs of how the science of evolution relates to their religious belief and interpretation. So many instead took on the title of saints or the faithful saints, some choosing it and others being given it by the humans who had not gained new powers, who could only view these new beings, these faithful saints, as an elevation of some humans blessed to be closer to God. Many of these faithful saints being adamant that such a title is not appropriate, yet the masses in the faith still call them such when discussing these newly elevated beings. The faiths also took interest in the registry of their elevated beings, once again not referred as elves in the faith but the faithful saints. However, this was more for religious significance, as the power stars had been seen as a tapestry of brilliant gems and adorned many tableaus and murals in houses of faith, very much the new constellations whose locations and arrangements were sifted through and searched through for deeper religious meaning and significance. And while the faiths had their own experience with the newly changed humans, there were many other groups of humans with many other plans and desires, with many achievements they sought to complete for their own personal significance, or for scientific or even grander purpose. And then there was Apex. Apex started as a private military contractor, or PMC, creating teams of compatible elves to carry out military contracts and missions, eventually branching out into research to learn how to improve their contractors' ability and their contractors' effectiveness at controlling these abilities. Using the funds from their military contracts, they engaged in increasingly focused enhancement and power gathering operations and experiments that they used to further their contractors' powers and achieve yet greater heights of power and control. Apex quickly rose out of this position, and its PMC history remained unknown to most of the public. The leader of Apex striving to make an organization that could create new elves. At least that was the public image. In reality, Apex sought to become its own nation, or if it could not achieve it, to take over a nation and eventually bring the world under the dominion of what they believed to be the greatest of humans. As an apex animal is the peak of what's known as a trophic level, meaning they occupy the highest spot in the food chain, following in the footsteps of many fictional comic book or anime organizations like the Legion of Doom, whose members seek domination like Lex Luthor, Namor, and Sinestro. Apex may offer the path for a regular human to become an elf, but there's not a guarantee that all humans can walk the path to the end without damage or even fatal complications. Apex puts on a show of power and betterment, yet internally they pursue their goals no matter the cost to the rest of humanity, and unknown to most, their PMCs still operate throughout the world collecting research material to aid in their goal, everything from intelligence gathering to searching for new test subjects, whether human or elf. And I believe there'd be many other organizations. Another one of these would be the Collective, a cooperative elves who were created by a council. This council was bound together through mutual trust and respect. The council was formed by the first elves to gather in a very special place, the moon. So first one appeared, then another, and eventually a dozen elves stood on the surface of the moon. This all occurred within the first hours of the evolution event. Only those with great reserves of power, stored not in stars or nebulas, but galaxy-sized power stars, could achieve this. And yes, once again, power stars refers to all sizes, whether tiny, star size, or nebula, or even galaxy size. When the 12 looked to each other, there was an energy and immediate connection that they shared, and the trust of standing on the moon with your newly evolved kin formed a bond between them. Now this bond was very special, as they were just a dozen humans standing separate from the rest of humanity. Not only that, but the 12 possessed powers far beyond most elves, not only able to get to the moon in the first hours of the evolution event, but ones whose power reached far beyond that required to make such a journey. And the variety of powers they held allowed them to see much of Earth at a vast distance. Amongst them, their combined powers led to hold near omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence as a council, allowing them to see the need for action and a path that they could take to form a safe home for all elves where their powers would not cause harm unintentionally through the side effects of the elf abilities. Also seeing that a collective of elves policing and coming together as one culture would mean that the bad would have less of a chance of causing destruction against a unified collective of elves with a unified creed or code. The council saw the path that Apex sought to take and knew that they had to act. The council began to, until finally something happened that almost split them. The nations took action. The nations of Earth began to register their elves and reminded them that they represented their respective nations. The larger nations held more elves and as such more power. The most populous countries that hold more than 50 million people each are as follows. We're going to start with China with like 1.5 billion, India pretty close to 1.5 billion, then there's the United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Russia, Mexico, Japan, Ethiopia, the Philippines, Egypt, Vietnam, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Turkey, Iran, Germany, Thailand, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Tanzania, South Africa, Myanmar, Kenya, South Korea, and Colombia. So once again, those are all right now in the world that have more than 50 million people. So nationalism swept the globe in this world, and the masses of regular humans demanded their elves be more and more accountable for increasingly minute details of life, from using their powers to aid in public services like medical care or things like that, or even energy production, and also being conscripted into defense forces in a parallel to the nuclear arms race during the second half of the 20th century. The nations would desire their evolved citizens to take part in national programs, yet many individuals, from the faithful saints to those seeking to join Apex, would many times see their powers as something that alienates them from their countrymen or kin, seeking only to find their own path. Some even sought to leave Earth at this point, beginning to construct great colony ships and vessels, sometimes at odds with and sometimes supported by their own nations. And then Apex attacked. Seeking to create a permanent base of operations in controlled land, Apex launched many simultaneous attacks, successfully taking over a lot of territory. Now, they funded these attacks, but they did it without any public connection to the Apex organization, so most of the world saw this as an attack by dangerous and unregistered elves, not as an attack backed and organized by Apex themselves. This allowed Apex to gain even more control while secretly supporting the ones who controlled the captured territory. The nations, with the aid of their elves, fought back, and in the subsequent war, the Council made itself known, organizing much of the resistance against the takeover of nations. Though many of these territories claimed by Apex-supported elves took months or years to recapture, or remained secretly under the control of Apex after they were recaptured, much of this actually took place over weeks. The majority of places were liberated over the place of weeks, the Council acting as a communications network and go-between for the nations, using their powers to instantly respond to many of these attacks. And remember, if elves that were backed by Apex truly tried to attack, they could do many things such as cutting traditional communications or disrupting many traditional things. So the Council took its new place and was praised for it. And in the coming years, by the time they had finally liberated all of the captured territory, they had formed a great network of followers and supporters that they referred to as the Collective. The ensuing battle saw many elves create technology for both sides that then became widely utilized, using the 5 categories of elves from form changers, elementals, enhancers, manipulators, and creators to manufacture and engineer tools and weapons, very much like the support heroes from My Hero Academia. These great manufacturing projects undertaken, making the power of the elves free to use by any normal human if they could acquire the right tool or weapon. After all of the nations were liberated or secretly aligned with Apex and made it seem as though they were liberated, humanity and the elves both agreed that there needed to be a change, whether through regulation or separation, out of fear and out of the stinging loss that many had experienced, and the newly created weapons and tools from the war that could be used to tear down society should they get into the wrong hands. The regular humans chose to force the elves to be contained into one location. Now, they were allowed to travel from there, but they had to live in that one location. It was a great floating island above the Atlantic Ocean, a floating continent that could be dropped into the ocean if both the Elf Council and the nations all agreed unanimously, each side having their own key to ensure that cooperation would be the only way to send this floating continent into the sea below it, and that the elves would hold as much power over their fate as the nations did. Though little did the nations know that the floating continent was Apex's backup plan for acquiring a permanent base, utilizing mind wipe or brainwashing and invisibility tech created during the war from the elf powers to hide their inhabitants of this new continent, and to hide their control of nations, giving tech to their supporters around the world to allow for a network of hidden Apex loyalists. You might be wondering what happened to the faithful in all of this. Well, as we've seen during times of war, the religious are no different from any other soldier. Millions upon millions of religious people fought in World War I, and it even provided unique opportunities for some. For example, many women held positions in religious organizations during war that they would not have had before, and religion held a significant impact on the unifying of sides in many wars, including things like the Crusade and the World Wars. And whether or not any of the faiths would choose to join with Apex publicly, there would certainly be individuals or small splinter groups, or even new interpretations of faiths that would result in many religious people existing on both sides. And again, the faiths are the religious, and the faithful saints are the elevated supers of those faiths. And as any individual granted that amount of power would feel at the very least alienated and at the very most a demigod, the individual choices and actions of the faithful saints would vary drastically in intent, purpose, and religious significance. So the world changed. The power stars forever lit up in the universe in near infinite variety, appearing along with the powers of the newly titled elves, reacting and shimmering whenever their respective elf activates their power. This is a world where the organization of Apex forever seeks to achieve what they believe is their rightful place. And the Council of Elves has publicly become an institution upon the new floating continent. And though you may think of the floating continent as a jail or a means of segregation, the powers, tools, and technological advancements made during the war, from the harnessing of the power of the elves, made instant travel throughout the world possible with teleportation gates, newly improved land, sea, and air travel. Although many were abandoned, scrapped, or even destroyed during the war, there are still the grand colony ships being constructed to make space travel possible. And who can say how many of these managed to leave the planet before or during the war, or how many elves have chosen to construct their ships on sites beyond Earth amongst the rest of the solar system or upon the surface of Mars. This is also the world where the religious supers or the faithful saints are praised for the miracles they achieved during the war and the lives they changed and saved. Many of the key technological advancements that made the new world what it is were created from the harnessing of the power of the faithful saints. So whether a regular human or not, there are many new advancements that make endless possibilities for humanity. The apex contractor elves, the council and the collective of elves, and the faithful saints change the world forever with their appearance and the many powers that can be categorized in the 5 titles of form changers, elementals, enhancers, manipulators, and creators. And many of these powers being put into tools that any human can use should they acquire them. Now, I didn't discuss the leader of Apex or my ideas for cool supers, but this was just supposed to be about the start of a world like My Hero Academia or any superhero universe like DC or Marvel. I really love daydreaming about all the possibilities that could exist in this new elf world and beyond. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. This was my video on Day 0, or the beginning of supers, mutants, quirk holders, heroes, or as I referred to them, the evolved or the elves. This is the world I created, and I guess we'll call it the birth of the realm of elves. So I hope you didn't find my ramblings too incoherent, but it's another really rough day as usual, and I needed to lose myself in a story to forget about everything else. This is a world I've often thought about over the past 5 years or so, getting a clearer picture of what it would truly be. A world with crazy technology that can make instant travel possible like a boom tube from DC Comics, or any sort of technology. The best comic book universes have technology that can stand side by side with magic or superpowers and effortlessly complement each other instead of clashing or overpowering each other. The variety of elves, once again that's ELVS, where they're part of the collective or apex, and the faithful saints are as realistic as I could make this imaginary world's peoples. I hope you didn't think my original story was too cringy. I just looked at the time right now and I need to stop writing and get to work on recording the narration, and then I have no clue about what visuals I'm going to use for this. I guess probably some My Hero, Marvel, and DC stuff, but I'm probably gonna have to do some minimal visuals because I put all of my effort into the script again. Anyways, thanks for watching. Leave this video a like if you enjoyed it. It took such a long time to get the classification system right, as I did make it up 5 years ago and had almost completely forgotten it, but you guys reminded me about it with this request. So subscribe for daily videos. I make at least 1 video every single day. I'm getting pretty close to 200 videos. That should be next week. And leave any questions or suggestions in the comments below, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Oh, and just quickly, what type of superpower would you choose? Would you be a form changer, an elemental, an enhancer, a manipulator, or a creator? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm interested to see what you would choose. So thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.